Welcome to the Art of Divergence podcast. I'm Sammy, and I'm joined by my colleagues Allie and Heather. Today we're going to be sharing with you part 2 of our interview with Lawrence Harris. We shared part 1 in our previous episode, and part 3 will be in our upcoming episode. Just as a reminder, the information provided in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not replace mental health treatment or therapy. Allie, did you have some questions for Lawrence on the process of guiding some people through journaling and how he presents it, how he can kind of advise on it?
Sure. Yeah. I really like your visual scenery that you paint. I practice narrative therapy a lot, and you're great at it just by practicing yourself. So, when you come across somebody maybe that's struggling with painting that picture, maybe they're not a visual learner, or maybe they're just struggling with coming up with words to describe their emotions, how do you work with them, or what would you say to them?
Someone who has trouble with describing their emotions. The first thing I would do with someone like that is describe it in as simple terms as you can. So saying something such as, if you went to the average 15-year-old and you said, define rumination, they don't know what that is. But if you said, do you ever feel like your thoughts are making more thoughts and you don't like it? Oh yeah, I deal with that all the time. Like, I get worried that what if I fail my test and then I fail the grade and then I'm going to fail high school and I'm going to end up a dropout and, have to starve on the streets. They know what that is. So if someone's having trouble with describing their emotions, I would just say it however it sounds in your brain. You might say something like, I feel like a deer in headlights. I'm just overwhelmed. Everything's so scary and big, and I freeze up whenever I'm nervous. And if you just write it out, the great thing about journals is they don't care how long you take to get to the point. You could spend 20 pages just saying the same thing over and over until you finally figure out what you're actually trying to say. And eventually, when it comes time to express how you're feeling to maybe your parents, your family, your relationship, your therapist, whoever, now you have a clear enough idea of how to translate all of this up in your head into something smooth that flows out.
That's great. Yeah, it's just working with what you have and the visuals that you may have, or even just a word, and trying to figure out what that word means to you and practicing. So you're really getting into mindfulness and practicing just journaling what you feel in the moment. And I think that's great. Any other challenges that come up when you're journaling yourself, or when you're trying to create a motivational presentation?
Well, eventually when you journal long enough, you're going to get to the parts that you don't enjoy. Like, a big reason why I can come on podcasts or stages of hundreds of people and tell them about, when I was 12 years old, my dad blacked my eye and I couldn't hear for a little while. The reason I can come up on a stage and talk about that is because I've been willing to sit with the feeling, process it, not try to run from it and force it away, but say, hey, that thing happened and it felt bad, but I'm going to allow myself to do the healing I need to move forward. And when someone's journaling, it might not be that exact thing that comes up for them, but things are going to come up, such as when they were 15, for example, and they were in a relationship and they were the one who were actually the problem. Like, the reason the relationship ended was actually that person's fault. And then they realize that. And that's going to be emotionally painful. So a challenge a lot of people are going to eventually have to cross is the point where you have to reflect on the parts of your life that you didn't enjoy, that might have been a little painful, that you suppressed. And it's at these points where you can simply just stop writing, take a deep breath, and then come back to it when you're ready, and you process it over a long span of time so that you don't ever go too deep too fast. And when I'm presenting this to people, in my presentation, I let it be known that, hey, you're going to want to start out gradual. Don't go too fast. You want to just do 15 minutes a day at most. And you want to do it when you're not already actively in a deep emotional spiral so that you don't unknowingly drag yourself deeper. You want to start journaling when you are at a calm state, or you want to journal if you already notice yourself like, I'm really down right now and I need to write this out. Go into it with the intent of looking for a solution. express how you feel when you're journaling, but go in looking for what can I do? Is there anything I can do? And don't say, well, there's nothing I can do because then you're going to start convincing yourself of that. But you go in and just ask yourself, what can I do? I've done a lot of presentations to schools and organizations that were in very low income, high crime neighborhoods. And I go in with a full awareness of what their lives are like living there. So when I tell them to journal, I say, well, even if it sounds delusional at first, specifically ask yourself, what can I do? Look for a solution. And even in the most perilous, hopeless situations, if you ask yourself, what can I do? You start to find a solution somehow.
I think maybe even that solution is just I can feel it. I can let it pass. I can distract myself. I can seek comfort. I can seek different types of self-care that are accessible to me because yeah, that's what came up in my mind is what do you tell someone to write about who feels like they don't have control over their situation and feels maybe very trapped by a lack of resources or a lack of power, especially being a child in a situation like that. It is helpful to, ask them, what you can't do. What can you do? What can you do for yourself? What can your brain do? What is your next step? I think that like that's helping to combat the toxic positivity in a way too, because we want to see journaling and processing our emotions as productive in some way. And sometimes that productivity is just getting yourself into a clearer headspace or allowing yourself to name and feel your feelings. And that's doing something. So I think sometimes, those people really need to know that that is work. That is the something that you can do. It doesn't mean you have to go out and get a third job to, that's not what we're talking about. You don't have to fix your whole situation magically. You don't have a magic wand, but it's worth it. It's worthwhile. It is of value to do those things for yourself internally and answer those questions about what can I do? What do I want to do that, pushes me forward.
I love that. I think something that kind of crossed my mind was essentially the thought process is, oh, if my solution is to do this big, massive thing, and then it can't happen, and then there's the discouragement. So it's like, it's the step, right? It's something small that's going to lead you to something that's bigger, and it can occur over time and take this, process, especially when you have somebody who's, like you, Lawrence, where you are very open with the people that you communicate with. And so it's like, I just witnessed somebody be very vulnerable and who has gone through something that either maybe I can relate to or is similar to something that I know that somebody else experienced. And sometimes that can even be encouragement. Like you were modeling that for everybody in that room that, hey, here's a thing that didn't go great and I'm here. I've turned it around. I am here making sure that you guys are safe, teaching you how to take care of yourself, and you can do it because I'm living proof, right? And I think that is one of the biggest things for especially younger people who our brains are still kind of formulating, things like that.
Yeah, and I heard a lot of interesting things you brought up about kind of the structure, the expectations to give yourself. Starting small is helpful because, in the perspective of neurodivergence, a lot of the time, maybe a thought might be, I don't feel like I can start because I feel like I have to spend enough time having a long journal entry that makes sense and, I really apply myself to. And just saying, take the pressure off. 15 minutes starting off at the most. You start there and then see where you get. Also, not journaling when you are really in the middle of big emotions. Sometimes I think for people that have easy tendencies towards fixation, that can aid in that rumination of negative thoughts and spiraling. And so sometimes maybe that won't be as helpful as when you're clear-headed and you can reflect on things, or you can just kind of, idly see what comes into your mind about the things you've been experiencing and write them out and express about them. So I think that's an important point too, as we look through a lens of neurodivergence, to understand how does my brain work and what kind of ways can I set this up for myself. And then another thing I would like to ask about is something that can be a little scary as a neurodivergent person is a lack of structure. It sounds like you function really well with this open-ended nature, which I think in a way you've created a structure for yourself, right? Where you don't necessarily like write out the rules or have a bunch of specific tools you use, but you kind of know the style you like and you you seem to like stick to that in different ways. So I'm wondering if someone feels some anxiety around a lack of structure when it comes to journaling. Sometimes the open-ended nature of it feels a little overwhelming. What do you feel like some helpful directions, tools, easy structures might be to use?
The first one that came to my mind was pick a time of day to do it and do that at that time of day. So it could be before bed. It could be, for me, it's 10:15 in the morning. Every day, 10:15 in the morning, unless I have a serious reason why I can't do it at that time, that's when I journal. And knowing what to expect gives your brain a sense of clarity. Another thing I do, like overall for having a sense of structure, is in my bedroom, I have a whiteboard it's like one of these sticky whiteboards that you can buy off Amazon. It's taped to my wall. And every night I write out, what am I going to do tomorrow? When am I going to do it? And then I use Google Calendar to plan my day. So I have these periods where like I know what exactly I'm going to do, when exactly I'm going to do it. Now, the fluid part is I don't know what I'm going to write about, but I know I will. I don't know like what's going to come up, but I just allow it to. And for someone who they need like structure when it comes to journaling, having a time and also having a hard limit on when you stop. You might even also be able to add in like picking a theme before, like the day before. You can get creative with it. And the more you do it, the more you start to notice, what do I like? Is there a certain place I want to journal? Is there a certain pen that I want to use? Like for me, I have a big thing of like sensory feelings. And the best pen I've personally found for me when I'm journaling, it is what brand is this? It's called the Pilot G207.
That is so funny you say that because Allie and I were doing an ADHD share and support group, as we do with our Neurodivergent Ohio practice. And someone was saying that we were talking about hobbies and interests, and one of their hobbies involved like journaling and coloring and things like that. And they mentioned that they really love that pen brand, specifically like that type of pen. So that's funny that I have 2 endorsements. So I guess I need to go get that pen.
Yeah, the pen actually, like on it, it has micro engraved texture pads. So when you're holding it, it grips onto your fingers without you having to grab it. And it is insanely well balanced. It is a gel pen, so you don't have to use pressure when you use it. It just glides. And it glides so smoothly that after about 5 minutes, you don't feel the pen.
That's awesome. I really need to check that out. And it also lends to like having a good sensory experience with this thing. Another thing that I think could be a barrier for neurodivergent people can be the sensory experience. So having a pen you don't like and trying to journal with it probably is going to be very limiting, probably going to be a barrier. So maybe you like to journal on a clear, like just a blank page without lines. Sometimes lines are helpful. Sometimes people like to bullet journal so they can do like boxes and whatnot. I found that for me, the size and page and just like feel of everything can be helpful in making it a comfortable experience that I want to replicate. And, that also speaks to like environment. Where are you sitting and doing this journaling day to day? Do you have like a nice, clear, focused space for it? Can you get away from other distractions? Like noise canceling headphones for me would be huge if I was going to like adapt that journaling routine. And I think just routine in general really does, like you say, help to provide some of that structure and kind of force you into a place where everything else is structured, but you really do have to be open-ended and allow your brain to kind of search all its corners to see what you want to write about, instead of maybe trying to fit yourself into like a box of too many prompts or something too specific to where you're not kind of really getting it all out there. And it might be limiting in some ways. At least, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it, as the benefit of open-ended journaling itself and the structure elsewhere. Thanks for joining us for part 2 of our interview with Lawrence Harris. Part 1 can be found in the previous episode, and part 3 will be in our upcoming episode. Neurodivergent Ohio is an Ohio-based agency offering assessments, counseling, and community to neurodivergent folks of all ages. Find us in the description at our website, and you can also find Lawrence's information there as well, his website, his social media, anywhere you want to find it. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you back for part 3.